Hi, I'm Nathalia Edwards, and welcome to this second webinar in our little series about the foundations of the gut. The whole idea of the series is to shed a bit of light on gut health and how we can actually impact that in different ways and learn how what we eat impacts our gut and our health. So today's topic, it is zooming in on how your microbiome influences you. So for that, I've invited some very knowledgeable people within this space to have a panel discussion about that. So the first speaker I would like to introduce is Emilie Gladbach. So she's specialized in the microbiome research area. She's really great at translating these microbial sciences into something easy and understandable. And she has a focus on the microbiome's role in the human health space. And then we have Adam Baker here as well. He has worked for more than a decade on unraveling the interactions between bacteria and its host, us, and opening the world's eyes to how probiotics can play a role in our future health and how we work with that. And finally, we also have Rebecca Replogle with us as well. Her expertise lies within the nutritional science and research there, and really substantiating her knowledge into health innovations. And she's very focused on what the gut microbiome can do and how we can use biotic ingredients for that. So I am pretty excited to get this started. Before we really get started, there's a few practical things I've promised to mention. You can ask questions. It will be on the right side. There's a box for questions. Questions are anonymous for the other participants. They only come through to me. If you write in the comments section, everyone can see what you're writing, but do feel free also to write there. And then we will be having a few polls as we go. We really hope you will participate in the polls to make it more interactive. And they are, of course, anonymous, so the others cannot see what you're answering. So on that note, I would like to introduce the first poll. So we want to really dig into the microbiome. But the first question that comes to mind is, how big is this microbiome? And from a funny angle is like, how much does an average adult gut microbiome actually weigh? So option 1, 15 grams, option 2, 500 grams, or is it 1.5 kilos? Please do submit your answers and let's see what you think. Oh, few people are thinking that is pretty heavy. Fair distribution. Any more guesses? Vote on the weight of the gut microbiome. So this is what is inside you. We have leaning towards the 1.5 kilo. Okay, I think let's close this poll for now and see what we get out of it. So 19% saying it's 15 grams. Then we have 35% saying it's 500 grams and 47% saying it's 1.5 kilos. It is the 1.5 kilos. So the majority of you had an idea. I think it's a fascinating number. I think that's quite a lot of weight, actually. If you put it into like a bag of flour or something like that, that is part of your gut here, right? So now we know what it weighs. But Adam, what is the gut microbiome actually? Let's start with that.
Great. Thanks, Nathalia. And really interesting to see what everyone was saying. So what is the microbiome? Well, the microbiome is really the combination of us and all the trillions, and it is trillions, of microbes that live in and on us. And we're really only starting to get an understanding now of what sort of superorganism we are, combined with, as you just heard, 2 kilograms of microbes just within us, within the gut microbiome. We have many other microbiomes. And all of those things together, all of these microbes together with us, with the human cells, is what makes us human. So I like to try and think about it as maybe a galaxy, the Milky Way. We really got all of these constellations going on, things pulling and pulling and pushing against each other with energy in these things. So, and yes, there's the weight factor to it. There's also the genetic material. I'm a scientist and it's fascinating. We have 20,000 genes in the human genome. but we have up to 2 million genes we're carrying around from all the microbes on us. That's 100 times more genetic information that's there to help us get through the day, to interact with our environment, to try and keep us healthy. So, and we're just starting to learn the science of this. So it's a fascinating time. It's a fascinating era. So, but maybe Emilie has more to add to this.
I think you started out very nicely, Adam, and I like the picture of this galaxy with all the stars, and I think we can also come back to that. So I would actually like to jump onto the next one, Nathalia, because I think it's been explained really well.
Yes, so let's I think you put it quite interestingly, Adam, by saying it's what makes us human. So when we're first born, we start there in our mother's womb, and we don't have a microbiome. But as we are born, we actually get part of our mother's microbiome, or that supports us, kind of planting the first seed of our microbiome. And through life, different choices of where we live, what we're eating, our parents' way of upbringing us, how often we wash our hands, all these factors, especially the first couple of years of our life, are kind of the building blocks of our microbiome. So, Emilie, my question to you will kind of be, what defines our microbiome? What is it that creates it? There's so many factors. Can you take us through that a little bit?
Yes, and I think it's a really great question, and a question that I spent quite a lot of time on studying. And I think we have to look a bit back to what Adam said before about the stars and the galaxy, because Nathalia, you also said before it's a seed that sort of starts. But actually, we still don't really know, or it's still very debated, whether the microbiome starts before actually we are born. And there are some genetic factors also to that, not just the microbes. Or it starts only when we are born. And when we are born, some people are born by C-section, some people are born vaginally, and that also makes a huge difference on which microbes we actually get and to colonize our gut. And I think before moving into, I think, Rebecca's field, I would like to say that one of the first 1,000 days that we have in our life, so where we're about 3 years old, those days are extremely important for the first start of our microbial colonization and the whole composition of microbes that we have in our gut, which is of course influenced by breast milk or formula and a lot of other lifestyle choices like having pets. But maybe Rebecca have more to add to that.
Yeah, I think the development of the microbiome throughout our lifespan is really interesting, and there's a lot of questions remaining of how that interacts with different life stages. You know, Emilie, you've been talking about the development after birth, and there is really a sharp jump in number and diversity of microbes in the infant microbiome, you know, boosted by human milk oligosaccharides, which now formula makers are trying to incorporate, but they're really complex carbohydrates that nourish the microbiome. It's fascinating what nature can do in that regard. And as we grow into adulthood and maybe fall into certain dietary habits, stay in one place a little longer, you know, our microbiome sort of settles. I think actually what's really interesting is looking at the elder microbiome, where our habits maybe even come into a finer niche, and you know, you're eating less variety, you're eating, you know, the same thing that's palatable to you and maybe less of it, and microbiome diversity decreases. And I think it's a fascinating open question of how does that affect elder health. And I have a real J.J. Abrams lens flare happening here, so that's bringing some drama to the question as well. Where are we going next, Nathalia?
Well, I think it's interesting that you're saying the first 1,000 years, first 1,000 days, right? So we have 3 years that kind of start defining us. Is it possible to kind of look at the gut microbiome of young kids and point out where they're from, how they've been brought up? How much can we say when we look into their microbiome? Emilie, I think you're the expert.
Was it for me or for? Okay, yes, sure. Yeah, so there's been a lot of very incredible studies on that, and we've got some very good Danish researchers that have published quite a lot of studies here, mostly on, of course, Nordic kids, but there's also been different cohorts all over the world where you, of course, can see already from your little, like until 3 years of age, where you're originating from, and part of that is also based on what you're getting from your mother. So what is sort of transmitted, and also of course the way of lifestyle choices. I think like growing up, kids do different things. So in some cultures, it's more common to be to go to a kindergarten or another place where you get sort of away from your parents. So there's other people around you, and you can, of course, also pick up some of those microbes. And if you go more in the forest, for example, you get a lot of very nice bacillus spores, some of the things that Novo Nordisk is trying to put in their products, and several other factors.
Interesting. So we're talking about that we can find out where people are from, and these kids, we can kind of have an idea of their upbringing and such. And I think we're all interested in being healthy. So the big question is, do we know what a healthy gut microbiome looks like? Do you want to start this one, Rebecca? I think you're all going to have an opinion here, but let's start with you, Rebecca.
You know I'm going to. And that's that. No, I don't think we know what a healthy gut microbiome is. I think there could be multiple versions of what that looks like for an individual. And that it is truly on an individual basis of what is influenced by your diet, what's influenced by your own genetics and environment. And so there's not one single definition of healthy, but I think there are aspects and characteristics that we can look to start to characterize what's generally a healthy or a beneficial microbiome versus a detrimental one. And I'm sure my fellow panelists can go into some of those as well. One thing that I look to, and you'll probably hear me bring this up multiple times today, and that's diversity. I think that's one aspect that we can look to try and shape and encourage what we might call a healthy microbiome for us individually. But I'll turn it over to my other panelists as well to contribute. Adam,
what do you think of is there a healthy microbiome? Is it diversity? You look at some species and say you need those, you shouldn't have these. How can we see if we're healthy if we look there?
Exactly. No, I really like what Rebecca and Emilie said. I mean, if we go back to the beginning, we can start to see that the microbiome and the way that things happen, especially even from the start of life, are having impacts on our health. So you see that you're starting to see more associations, and we talk about that, particularly in westernized societies, this dramatic increase in autoimmune diseases, particularly in the children we're seeing. Why is that happening when at the same time we've been a fantastic species of getting rid of infectious diseases through the use of vaccines and other things? And we're starting to see how microbiome is playing a role in this. And Emilie was talking about cesarean sections, the way you're born, and you're actually seeing from the actual massive amounts of data coming out now how kids that are born with cesarean sections are, so to speak, having a slower build up of that diverse microbiome as they come out of those 1,000 days, and some of these increases in these autoimmune diseases. So we're doing a massive population experiment. But Rebecca said it completely right. We don't know what a healthy microbiome yet is. I mean, I mentioned there's 2 million genes there. There's these microbes living in and on us, and we're a super ecosystem that's responding to genetics, responding to nutrition, responding to what the heck's happening outside. And how we build this up and how this works together is, it's actually pretty complicated at the moment. So it's fun, and it's the start of a whole new era as we really start to understand the true importance of the microbiome. But I think we've simplified it. I'm being a bit cynical as a microbiome scientist for the last 15 years. We've been looking at it thinking if we can catalog the bacteria that are in us or the microbes, we can look and see what's missing and we can put it back and everything will be good. It doesn't really work like that at all. This is a super ecosystem of functionality on top of functionality, and we need to understand how we can nudge, push, use our lifestyle, use nutrition, use many things to actually have effects here. So diversity is a good thing. As Rebecca says, diversity is not a good thing if you look at the vagina microbiome or if you look at the infant microbiome. So we're really learning about how things are fluxing and things are moving. But as an adult, diversity seems to be good. But what that means in terms of the functionality and the health of the person, we're still trying to associate that. And it's technology that's allowing us to actually do this now. So this is where it gets really exciting.
So I guess we all just want a smooth gut, right? It's all functioning well. That's the ideal situation. But when it's not, and I think you were kind of alluding to it a bit, Adam, with autoimmune diseases, we're starting seeing. So I was thinking, Emilie, like what health impact can it have if it's not working well? What diseases can we see coming up in individuals that are having a poor microbiome for some reason?
So I think carrying over from what we talked about before, the key is here the functions, right? And the functions are important because everything that is happening in the gut microbiome has some kind of an axis. So we have like a gut-brain axis, we have a gut-liver axis, we have axis everywhere in our body to our microbiome. And it's always a question, is it a bit the hen or the egg? But in this case, I would say many of the things also Adam talked about, autoimmune disorders, and for example, things like asthma, is quite often related to what is going on in the gut. So I think we know of many different areas, like in obesity, in digestive health, in different brain neurological disorders, also in like cardiovascular health, and we see a lot of links that can be established if you have a dysbiosis in your gut. So it means that you don't have like a good microbial composition and integrity of the gut barrier.
Okay. So I heard you saying, Emilie, that the gut is kind of connected to more or less every function in our body. So there must be a lot there's still to really learn there, right? I know we've also been working a bit on this gut-brain axis, and I find that fascinating, because I don't think that a lot of people kind of see the gut as a second brain, but it's kind of starting to look like it is. And that whole saying of a gut feeling, that's really true. It's connected to much more than we think. Rebecca, do you want to shed some light on some of that, the gut-brain axis maybe?
Yeah,
just briefly.
Absolutely fascinating topic. Absolutely fascinating topic. And I love that both the science world and the consumer world is getting excited about it. I think it's driving a lot of interest in research and understanding and education. It's still at first it seems like an odd concept that your gut and your brain are connected. But like Nathalia, you just said, to have a gut feeling, it's in our idioms in a lot of places. I always use the analogy, like think about when you're going into a job interview or you're going to be a webinar panelist and you feel that nervousness or anxiety that's in your brain, you feel it in your gut. And so in some ways it is very intuitive that these two systems are connected. And I always like to reinforce that it's a two-way street. And the gut to brain piece is now what we're finding more about, of how our microbiome influences neurotransmitters, anxiety, stress capability, coping with stress, mood balance, and even cognitive function is just incredibly fascinating. And of course, as humans that want to, maximize our capabilities, then the first question becomes, well, how do we leverage it? How do we take the microbiome and use it as a tool to better ourselves? And nothing wrong with that. It's just a fascinating world, and there are starting to be really interesting studies and probiotics that are coming out in that space that have a real impact, and incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot happening in this space, and we're really starting to see ourselves as this, holobiome symbiotic organism, actually, and that's and a lot is happening in the fields of research within this. And I was like, and now we've been talking about the gut-brain axis. Adam, do you have any areas of this research field that are moving fast at the moment that you feel are interesting and kind of for the future perspective?
I think the gut-brain axis is a very interesting area. I think I would like to come back to what you were saying, Nathalia, because this is how the shift is happening. So there's so many areas that are shifting. The fact that we think about the gut-brain axis now, because as you said, it is exactly how we've been liking to think about it. It's just a tube. It's just this. We put food in. We want it to go smoothly. And if it doesn't go so smoothly, maybe you get a bit of a bad stomach and things like that. But it's so much more fundamental than that. I don't know. It's a command central. It's everything, running everything here. Now the fact that we know that Rebecca was bringing up the neurotransmitters, the short chain fatty acids, these small molecules, they're produced by the microbiome. They're doing the communication. They're floating around your body, either doing a very, very important physiological effects or taking it back as well information. And so we're just starting to understand how it's involved. And I think some of the most exciting areas for me is just the more general acceptance that microbiome science is fundamentally involved in so many areas. We want to actually start to understand it. And this is where we're starting to move into it, that we can look at the microbiome. We can also look at other data that we can get from these great things we're wearing, the wearables and all these things, which is really measuring great health parameters. And we sort of ignore it every day. But then we're now starting to see, because this is a fundamental way for you to see the microbiome in action, in terms of gut-brain. Are you sleeping better? Are you sleeping well? Are you relaxed? Are you more stressed or less stressed? Can we start to see that our resting heartbeat is a little lower in cardiovascular effects? These are amazing medical technologies that we're walking around with all day. And it's a great way for us to sense what's happening with a very complicated microbiome that's affecting multiple processes in the body. So are there certain areas? I think the fact that serious diseases involved Parkinson's, Alzheimer's have been now linked very much towards the microbiome is always a predisposition. How people respond to cancers with some immunotherapies is now being linked, that you can change that based on the microbiome. We're starting to understand, and when you have these types of effects, people take it seriously and then start to understand the importance generally in health. Because I think, it is a challenge for us, because we always used to talk about the microbiome or health and food supplements, and it's all about health and healthy people. We now know how, you said to Emilie, which diseases, well, sort of, you could almost say so many diseases are starting from sort of dysregulation, dysbiosis, and things going wrong through the gut, through the immune system that's surrounding the gut and all of these areas, and the neurotransmitting that's going on from it. So we're just learning how, and then what can we do to actually support this? Rebecca said it's fantastic. What do we do to make ourselves better, smarter, sleep better? So we can actually start to see if we can impact that. And that's what people are starting to do. So that's a great thing.
I think there's a lot of interesting things in that, Adam. I think for the people that are not so into the gut-brain axis, so just like put it clear, you were saying that the gut microbiome is actually helping sending signals to the brain. That's correct, I understood, right? So it is really communicating with us.
Some of these hormones, we call them, or these neurotransmitters, they're produced by the bacteria, and they're sending the relaxation signals to you, or stress signals to you, and all these other things. So, I mean, it's key. And you've got a superhighway of nerves. Rebecca said it, the nervousness you get, right? There's a superhighway of direct nerves, the vagus nerves, which are simply, you're not feeling it. Your brain is sensing what's going on in your gut. And yeah, it's a great phrase that we have that we now can put science behind, the gut feeling.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking there needs to be a new movie of the Inside Out, and just that's in the microbiome signaling and not just in your head, if you know that cartoon.
Yes.
So talking about diseases, do you think that if we get more knowledge and understanding of the gut microbiome, that we can kind of start seeing some of these diseases early on, picking them up a bit earlier and being more proactive? What's your opinion about that, Emilie?
So I definitely think that we will be able to. For some areas, it's still like Adam said, associations. But I think one thing is key here, and it's also a major trend in both the medicine and also nutrition world, and that is to sample your own microbiome using commercially available kits or other very interesting kits. And there, I think it's a beginning at least to, of course, get even more data and see more of these links that you just talked about, Natalia. But it's also like a key for people to understand, like if I have these bugs and I'm guided a bit, maybe in some visual graph of what is it that I need, then you might be able to either see I need to get some kind of nutrition like a probiotic or postbiotic, or maybe there's other factors I can do to improve. It could be like my sleep or other things that are very important for the microbiome. And I think like gaining all this data, and I think most of us in this call are also data nerds, we will be able to, use some of this data and actually do really cool microbiome based nutrition or therapies. But it of course requires that we also use a lot of machine learning and AI here. And I think, I think this is definitely going to be the future.
Because it is really huge data sets that we're working with here.
Yes.
Just to make it a bit more concrete. So it's complicated and all that. But if, as you said, Rebecca, we all want to kind of have the best version of ourselves. So what can we do to have a more robust gut microbiome? What's your take on that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways that we can influence our microbiome. Some things are out of our control, but there definitely are certain influences that we can control, like diet. And again, I am going to bring up diversity here. I really like the adage, and I'm sorry, but I don't know who to attribute it to, but versus the old saying of you are what you eat, the updated version now being you are what your microbes eat, because they influence so many parts of our health and physiology. And so when we think about how to best take care of them, of this whole other ecosystem that's living inside of us, dietary diversity becomes a huge part of it. Not just feeding them the same thing, but giving them variety, which is the spice of life. So a greater variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, those fiber-containing components of a healthy diet. And theoretically, we all know what a healthy diet looks like. It, in general, has been established for some time. That's not to say we're all meeting it, but definitely incorporating fiber-rich foods helps fuel your microbes because they are able to take those more complex carbohydrates or fibers that we can't digest and at least partially digest them, create those beneficial metabolites that then enter our circulation and influence health. So particularly, this is where the concept of prebiotics comes in. So those substrates that our microbes can utilize for their own health and ideally, secondarily, our health. So yes, fiber, but not all fiber is necessarily a prebiotic. Those that are really well established are found naturally in your garlic, onions, artichokes, the allium families. But in general, fruits, vegetables, whole grains are a fantastic place to start. I think what's really interesting is as our understanding of the microbiome and its influence on health becomes more sophisticated, our understanding of how to push it one way or another also becomes more sophisticated. And so, just thinking about health in general, we have diets that are designed to improve cardiometabolic health, like with the DASH diet. And we're now, I think, taking that same sort of concept into the microbial realm, and we have seen studies on the psychobiotic diet, again, back to the gut-brain axis, trying to push that system to benefit the individual. So again, really, really exciting area of research that, like Emilie was saying, ideally will ultimately become a very personalized setup of your personal diet tailored to your microbiome, your individual genetic makeup and environment. That's the ideal goal. We're a long way still, but it is so exciting.
Yeah, we are a long way from it, but we are getting to understand things, and we can go in some directions.
Nathalia,
and just
can I just add?
Yeah,
Could I add to this?
of course. Yes,
Sorry,
do that.
just butting in on you, because now I think it's fascinating what Rebecca's saying, and I think when we touch on like where Emilie and the personalized, we can start to get personalized, because what Rebecca's talking about is fascinating, how you can use diet, but I strongly believe that we have had this misconnect for sort of decades, because people can't actually see what's happening within them due to these diets sometimes, and it takes quite long clinical trials sometimes to actually demonstrate a traditional clinical endpoint. Whereas when people now are starting to be able to take that into their hands for the first time and actually say, I'm going to look at my microbiome, and then they maybe will be taking one of these diets or looking at taking extra fiber or working with their nutrition, they will actually start to see the changes happening. They will see the nudging happening, maybe even before they can feel it or see it in a blood test at a doctor's office, but they can see that happening. And that is such an empowering feeling. And that's also a personalization, that you're actually taking control of yourself using technology. And, I cannot say enough about trying to do microbiome testing. It's not that we can explain everything to people once you've got those results, but boy, does it change your mentality. You really start to think yourself about what does it mean, and maybe start to look at what guidance it could be giving you on an overall level. And then what Rebecca says, you can really try with things, and you start to see the critical role of nutrition. So, and it's not just the microbiome testing kits. You can do breath tests, which are measuring that. We can do the glucose monitoring, which is looking at things. All of these things are now associations where we can start to see, and it can empower us and give us a little bit of a motivation to keep going, to do these things. So
I
I think it's a very great point, Adam. I have a small comment, or just enforcing actually the last part what you said, because one of the things that I find like really amazing is that from a biological point of view, and like all the microbes I have I share maybe some of the ones that Adam have, but we don't have the same, and that also means something for our diet. And actually the bacterial part is the one that resembles mostly each other, but we also have other components in the gut, and they're much more diverse and are even further from, for example, Adam's and my rest of the microbiome is further from each other. And that reinforces also what Rebecca said. So I think it's going to be a really interesting future.
Yeah, there's surely a lot that can happen. But I also think that the takeaway is maybe that happy gut, happy the rest of you, right? So it's about feeding the gut with something that it needs, and you will potentially start feeling it. But we are a long way from being able to have these personalized diets, but we really hope that it's going in that way. Another option, of course, is also in this field of having a more robust gut and working on your gut health is within the probiotic space. So when we talk gut health and probiotics, Adam, what do you have to say on that topic?
It's a brilliant idea. Everyone should do it. But I mean, probiotics have been maybe the longest studied parts of the microbiome. Rebecca's talking about prebiotics. We're really shifting now to talking about a biotics world. It's the prebiotics, it's the probiotics, it's the postbiotics, and all of these metabolites that they're producing. We're understanding those complicated relationships. And I think it's a field which is really becoming a powerful field now. We've been studying probiotics and how they work for decades, literally decades, 40, 50 years. But the technologies have not been there to allow us to really understand what is happening. And the readouts have really been questionnaires and asking people how they're feeling. Are you feeling better? And that's a very difficult way to do this type of research. Whereas now Emilia talked about it. We've got AI, we've got big data. We're really powering through this now. And we're really starting to demonstrate how wide-ranging just probiotics are in how they work, because we've been studying them for decades. We understand the molecular mechanisms, the small molecules they produce, what they do when we put them into certain people at certain times. And we're playing catch-up in certain other areas. Fibers we know a lot about. HMOs, the milk oligosaccharides from breast milk, amazing. I mean, the fact that the mum spends so much energy producing these in breast milk, and Rebecca was talking about it, you get no nutritional value out of them. They're there purely to feed the bacteria, to encourage bacterial growth, and maybe have some direct impacts on immune and other things. But they are food to bacteria, to encourage the start of your microbiome. So I think it's still just such a young field. So, probiotics sound sort of old and dietary supplements, but it's not. It's young. We're actually shifting the whole field now as we understand the microbiome and the components that are not just probiotics, but prebiotics. And Emilia talked about it as well. We have fungi, phages. We have so many things. It's an ecosystem. And that's what we're starting to understand. And we're starting to understand it with the readout of us doing it in humans, because that's the best way to do it. So, and we're starting to be able to do this now.
I think it's fair enough. It's not bad that it's old news. I think you say very well. It's the part we maybe understand the best, and we can also see it's the part that consumers understand the best, because it's been around for quite some while. So there's a ton of research in this area, right? We're learning so much about the microbiome and all that you've been talking about now. But where are we going, and how is that kind of going to impact our future health and how we manage our health in the future? So actually, we would like to hear all of your opinion about that. So we have a second poll coming up now, where we encourage you to put your opinions out there. This will be quite some reading here. But how do you think our increasing understanding of the microbiome will reshape our view of what makes a healthy body? So we have 5 different options here. So a shifting focus from just the human cells and physiology to a more holistic view that includes the trillions of microbes in our body. That was A. B. Health may no longer be defined by a single organ, like the heart, but by an overall health of your body's entire ecosystem. And C. The definition of healthy may vary from person to person, recognizing that each individual's microbiome is unique, as Emilie was alluding to before. Is that how we're going to see treating people in the future? Or D, a growing understanding of how what we consume affects our microbiome, with the potential to boost health and prevent diseases through informed diet choices? Or is it going to be D, routine testing of our microbiomes could become a common thing, like blood testing is today? So we have that insight. I think we've been talking about all the topics. How do you think, where are we going with this? Getting a few views in there. You don't have to know the answer. It's just what you think. There's no wrong answers here, because we're talking about predicting the future. It's actually quite an even pick. That's interesting. Okay, so I think we can start ending the poll now. And fairly even distribution, with the majority on D, that a growing understanding of how what we consume affects our microbiome, with the potential to boost health and prevent disease through informed diet choices. I think that sounds very reasonable as well. What's your view on this, Emilie?
So, as Nathalia said before, I think that all of these 5 different ones are all of them will play a big role in the future. But I actually agree with the audience here. I think that there's the fact that we know more about what we consume will affect our microbiome, and how we ourselves, through either personal nutrition or supplements or other things, can actually boost our own health and prevent that we have, for example, neurological damage or other damages. I definitely think that is going to play a huge role. And as Adam said before, we don't actually know, we don't have like all the research in this area yet, so there's still some innovation to go there, but it's a huge space, and there will be a big market in the future. So I really agree. And I think then number two, which is B, that health may no longer be defined by one single organ, relates a lot to me, because I feel like if I went to a hospital and would see, for example, the cardiovascular department, I would think, well, but okay, I have something here, but maybe there's also something else that is not really healthy. So for me, it's more about also actually the holistic approach.
I think it's interesting that it's D that's selected the most. I think it also connects well with what you were saying, Adam, about this empowerment, because I think especially this one, that leaves quite a lot of empowerment, that we can start thinking about how we eat to better ourselves. So I have a little bit of a more tangible question. I've been thinking about the fact that often talking about the gut, especially also what comes out of it, that's not something we do that often. It's a little bit of a taboo around it, a bit of shame in our society. Do you think if we were better at talking about it, that would change a lot of things around this area? Would we be able to pick up diseases before? Should we start talking more openly about it? What are your thoughts on that, Rebecca?
Oh, well, I, in this particular area, have very little shame, I guess. But and you're still saying it. You're still avoiding saying poop, and all the digestive output, because it is very important. And I joke, we have a lot of knowledge, and that is all at the expense of some poor nutrition science grad student who had to process the samples that gave us that data. So just be thankful that somebody's willing to go through that to give us the scientific knowledge that we have today. But I absolutely think it could be more normalized. And I think it's getting there, at least within certain segments of the population, or at least in certain conversations where it's comfortable to talk about that, because it's a diagnostic tool, both just visually and descriptively, let alone once we start actually getting data, like with the microbiome testing. So I'm here to put that opinion out, that yes, it could be more normalized and help us all just get to a better level of conversation on it.
Yeah, and something that will be useful, right? So we do see that a lot is happening on the research side here. We are getting to understand a lot more. I'm kind of gathering that you all think that this is going to have a huge impact on our future health and how we approach health. And with that said, I think we need to go over to some questions. So we managed to get through them as well. Some few nice ones have already come in, but please do put in your questions into the question sections or the comment, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So one that has come up here, I think this one is for you, Rebecca. If you are allergic towards certain food compounds, for example, chili, is it also partly connected to the composition of your microbiome?
It's a good question, and I think it's not always the same answer for every allergy. There is evidence that probiotics and the microbiome can influence the level of allergic reaction, but that very much depends on the individual and the allergen in question. I personally don't know around a chili or capsaicin allergy how that might be mediated, but it's certainly something to look into with your health professional.
And then one for you, Emilia, I think, here. So do you think we're going towards this more precision medication and antibiotics in the future when it comes to health?
So I think we did discuss a little bit during this session, and I definitely think that is the road that we are going to go. But we might also go somewhere where we've been thinking a lot about precision and personal nutrition and drugs, and then we will perhaps come to the conclusion that we don't maybe need for every single individual one individual treatment or one individual nutrition plan, but perhaps for this little segment of these 5% of a group and versus 10% of the next group. But I think the next maybe 10 years in the microbiome research is going to show us that.
And then we have a longer one here about fermented foods. That may nearly be for me here, but it's saying, so fermented foods provide not only nutritious and fiber-rich foods, but also large amounts of live and potentially beneficial microbes with new genes that could be absorbed through horizontal gene transfer by the host microbiome. Could fermented foods become a super microbiome boosting strategy that people can leverage in their kitchens? Adam, I'll maybe let you start, and I'll also give my view on that.
Yeah, people often ask me that when you go to a probiotics conference. I love the idea, and yes, of course. I mean, we talked about it, Rebecca. Diversity is fantastic. I mean, fermented foods, it's an absolutely brilliant. You're getting very much fibers. You're getting a great collection of microbes. You're also getting the metabolites. You're getting short chain fatty. You're getting so much good stuff. It's often challenged that against probiotics or something. There's no challenge. Probiotics in some respects are just single strains or small groups of strains that have been tested in certain ways. Fermented foods are also starting to be tested. They're maybe a little different every time, but they're on the basic same starter culture. And overall, it's a fantastic idea. Diversity is great. I mean, so I love the idea. So.
Yeah, from my point of view, I'm all about fermented foods. My background is in fermented beverages, and I think it is a rich source of all sorts of things, and we don't fully understand it yet. But I can just also advertise for the previous webinar, which was actually about fermented foods and that impact on human health and how we have been surviving as well. So that you can find on Novaness's website as well, if you're curious to hear more about that topic. So next question here, and maybe Emilia, I think we'll start with you here. So how defining is the first 1,000 days versus rest of life, and which primary factors will destroy or have negative impact on your microbiome throughout life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good and very complicated question. So thanks for that. So as we talked about before, the first 1,000 days or to about the age of 3 is very important for the rest of your life. It's a bit like Adam talked about before. That's where some of the autoimmune diseases sort of have, or it's believed to have the origin, or at least an association to that. But I think the question was also about other factors. But if I just carry on here, and I think when we go beyond the age of 3, it's of course still a long path until the microbiome is fully established. Of course, it's resilient. But you will also have some periods during your life, for example, when you're in puberty, where there's a lot of hormonal interplay that can also change your microbial composition in the gut and the skin, anywhere where you have microbes. And then, as Rebecca said, you will have some period between, I think, somewhere in the middle of your 20s until maybe after, if you're a woman, after you have menopause, where you have, somewhere a stable microbiome, and then in the end, it will decline again. And the factors can be many different things, like lifestyle, what you eat, how you sleep, do you do sport, do you have a big family, do you eat a lot of spices, do you travel, do you get infections, all these things. And of course, also a lot of things related to your gut-brain axis, how you feel, are you depressed, things like this.
To the second part of the question there, like, is there any special factors that are negative for your gut microbiome? Do we know of any factors that are directly negative?
We know many medications and we know antibiotics.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. Yeah. Do you want to allude to that, Adam?
Yeah, I think. Sorry for jumping in there, Emilia, but yeah,
No, please do.
I agree, and I mean, I think we've ignored the microbiome so much over the years and decades. Yeah, so I mean, some of the facts we talk about how we're affecting the young children and the first 1,000 days. How many courses of antibiotics are you giving the children? Because doctors quite often say, well, there's no side effects. We'll give the course of antibiotics. You're not seeing what it is actually doing within you. And there's some, I don't know, facts from the UK. Is it 16 courses of antibiotics before you're 18 years of old and things? And these things are having effects. There's medications that many millions of people are on that are directly, primary one side effects is affecting the microbiome, disturbing the microbiome, reducing diversity, having quite strong effects. And we've been sort of not taking those into account. So I think now, that's what Emilie was saying, now we're starting to see that, and so many things have effects. It's resilient, your microbiome, but it's there doing things and trying, and the diversity you bring to it and what you're doing is trying to hold itself together. But there's a lot of factors, everyday factors, that's pretty much being attacked. So
Yeah, and I guess it's been a lot about treating the symptoms, and now we are, as you said, Emilie, of this, how where we see the future, it's not just that I have a problem with my heart, well, I'll go and see the cardiologist. It's connected, and not only are the organs connected, but there's more to it that we need to start considering.
exactly.
But we're still here, so it's gonna despite antibiotics.
It's all positive. It's all positive. We've just not been maybe taking full respect or care of ourselves, and now with a slightly more holistic approach, taking into account nutrition and all of these things, we can actually maybe make things a little nicer again.
We're just learning more, so we can take the choices. We can make the choices with the more knowledge that we have, right, and learn as we go. That's probably the main thing we need to do here. Then I have another question. We're listening about probiotics in kombucha and other fermented products, but are all probiotics similar and good for us? And how can we know that a probiotic is a real probiotic? That's a very good question. So I can start with saying no, they are not similar, and it's not all that are found in fermented foods that are probiotic. To be classified as a probiotic, you have to have shown that it has a benefit on the host, which is us, if consumed in a live format in an adequate amount. So that's kind of how you define a probiotic. Not saying that there can't not be good strains out there in some fermented foods that we just don't know about yet, but that's the definition of it. So to the question about how you can know if a probiotic is real, I think this question is coming from the US because there it's a bit more loose about the regulation and what we can say on probiotics, whereas in Europe and other parts of the world, we can hardly call it a probiotic. So Rebecca, what do you think there? How can you see if it's a probiotic is a real probiotic if you're out there buying a food product with probiotics, for example?
Yeah, it's a challenge for the everyday consumer, I would say, because the US structure is not regulated upfront the way Europe is. So although probiotic should be substantiated by the definition, the scientific consensus definition that Nathalia just mentioned, it doesn't necessarily always work that way. And strains should be labeled in the ingredient line, ideally with species, like genus, species, and strain, which is the most specific level that you can identify a probiotic by. That lets you then be able to link it to the research that's been done on it. Again, that is a fairly onerous task for a consumer. There are some advocacy agencies and rating groups with lists of validated probiotics. And of course, you can always reach out to a nutritionist or your doctor to get some recommendations for that. But acknowledging that it is hard for someone to just pick up a product and know that, yes, this is a quality probiotic and it's going to do XYZ for me. Because we've also just been talking about the variety of benefits that you can get from microbes. So it's on those of us in the scientific realm and in the food industry to increase education and knowledge on the topic, I think.
But I think you're right about if the strain is listed properly. So not just with the species, but this specific strain, that's acknowledging that it's a proven probiotic they've put in there. If it just says lactobacillus or bacillus coagulans or something, it's a bit more unclear what it is. So I think the more transparency there is on the products, the more you can count on it being something proven, and potentially also if they are claiming how much is in there. So a cell count, because you do need a certain amount of cells for it to actually have an impact on you. In that question, there was also if the probiotics are similar or if they're different. Adam, what can you say about that?
Well, I mean, we can definitely say categorically they're quite different. Probiotics are, which you just described it well, what they do, but they work in different parts of, just say, your intestine or the body, and they are doing very different functions. Some of them are stimulating the immune system just by their cell walls, the way they're interacting with your immune system. Some of them are producing molecules which are talking to your brain. I mean, others are helping other bacteria grow, so you have a very, very strong, deep microbiome. There's so many different functions. I mean, the word probiotic is a challenge because it is generalizing so much. And if you talk about antibiotics, you never think of them all as the same thing. You think of them doing different functions and attacking different sites. But probiotics, we do generalize. And so as we start to think microbiome science and the functions, the functionalities of what's happening, then we can start to characterize these things a little bit into the areas they work. But they're very, very diverse. And that's part of the amazing science that we're learning. And it's part of the challenges at the moment. And yes, consumers have a really tough time when you're delivered a scientific name on the side of a package and you have to try and translate into what does that mean for you as a consumer. We've got a lot to do to help.
Yeah. And hopefully that will get more transparent and easier, more convenient in the future. And as we learn more, and regulations potentially also change. Let's see what's happening. So we're getting close to the full hour now. So I'll just say some closing words on it and also advertise that we will be having a third webinar on the 3rd of December, where we'll dig a little bit deeper into gut healthy beverages. Historically, now what can be done within the probiotic space? Are the options in there? Because beverages seem to be a very convenient way of consumers getting their daily gut boost in some way. I like that you said earlier, Adam, about this, that probiotics, they've been so long, they're old news kind of, but they're not really. Like for the consumers out there, they're still learning, but it is one of the most established functional ingredients out there. And we can easily see that they do link it to something healthy and they do link it to the gut. So we'll get more into that in the next webinar on the 3rd. There will be a link right now where you can sign up immediately. So it's done. Also, if you are going to be in Europe or in US or Canada, you will be getting a little free beverage if you wish for the webinar, a little hot beverage, since it's going to be on a cold December day. Thank you all for attending. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. I thought it was a great panel. Thank you all of you for participating. Bye.